Hey gang, it's Platt here, and today we're going to brew a pale ale with a TrueBrew homebrew kit. So let's go. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you know I love homebrew kits. I'm always out looking for different homebrew kits. And a few months back, I was at my homebrew shop and found this TrueBrew homebrew kit. It's a pale ale. Didn't use it over the summer, a little warm, but it's cooled off out here in Vegas, so kind of brewing season, so I decided to break it out. Let's see what comes in this kit. First thing we get is our handy instructions. Just reading through this, I like this set of instructions, fairly thorough. One thing it does, it kind of goes on to some basic brewing techniques, so I like that. We have our specialty grains. This is a partial mash kit. We've done several of these before, so if you've seen those videos, this shouldn't be too unfamiliar with you. We have our hops. Let's see, I've got 1 ounce of Cascade hop pellets. They give us bottle caps, which is nice. Just plain bottle caps. We get a can of Mutton's malt extract hopped light. So it's a light malt extract, but it's already hopped, and that's going to make a difference in our boil, and we'll discuss that when we get to the boil. Then we have 2 bags of Mutton's dry malt extract, 2 1-pound bags. We're going to use. I have 5 ounces of priming sugar. We'll use this at bottling time. We have a pack of Mutton's active brewing yeast. This is similar in the sense if you ever used a Mr. Beer kit, they have kind of a generic ale yeast, and this is what this is. If you have access to better yeast, or like Saf Ale US05, or specialty yeast, if this is a higher gravity beer, feel free to use that. And we have our bag for our steeping grains. What's not included with this is obviously like a brew kettle, whatever. Also, I did not find any sanitizer. You'll have to get sanitizer on your own. If you have any questions about sanitizing, I will leave a link up here to my video on sanitation. So this being a partial mash kit, let's start off with steeping our grains. Alright, so we're going to steep our specialty grains real quick. Want to cover a couple of quick points. I forgot when I was talking about the contents earlier. On the end of the box is an inventory of what should be in the box, but also it gives you projected alcohol by volume, starting gravity, finishing gravity, and IBU, stuff like that. But useful information. Some of these kits don't do that, but I really like that they put that on the end of the box. What we've done here is we started off with about 2.5 gallons. We heated it up to 155 degrees. I want you to remember the 2.5 gallon thing. Make a note of that because we're brewing a 5-gallon batch. You might remember the Brewmaster kit we recently did. We were doing a gallon batch, but we started off with 1.5 gallons of water, and that's because as the boil went through, we boiled off some of that water, and that 1.5 gallons got us down to, after the boil, got us down to around a 1-gallon batch. But here we're starting off with 2.5 gallons. We got it up to 155 degrees, and that 155 degrees is important because that's where generally grains, if we heat those grains or we steep them in water at that temperature, that generally activates the carbohydrates inside the grains and helps convert them into sugar, and it's that sugar that we need for making beer. So we're going to steep our grains now. And if you've never done a partial mash or steep grains, you want to dip it like a tea bag. And we're doing that because we want to get all those grains wet. We don't want any dry parts. Again, we're trying to get all that sugar out of those grains. So we're going to let this sit for 15 minutes. And then after 15 minutes, we'll pull it out. We're going to let it drain. We won't squeeze the bag. We're going to let that drain. Then we're going to bring this solution up to a boil, and then we're going to add our extracts. I'm going to do that now. We're going to come back at the end of the boil because I want to, again, talk about something where this kit's a little different than some of the other kits. And we're going to come back at the end of the boil. We'll do our hop addition then, and again, I'll explain that. And then I'll take you on to the next phase of wrapping up this brew. So let me finish this, and we'll come right back. Alrighty, so we finished mashing in our specialty grains. We removed the grains after 15 minutes. We brought our wort up to a boil, pulled the kettle off the heat, and then added our malt extract, our can of hop malt extract, and then our 2 bags of the regular malt extract or unhopped malt extract. Then we brought our wort back up to a boil, and we've been boiling for 45 minutes. Now, if you've seen a couple of these other videos, you know traditionally we do a 1-hour boil, and in that boil we do our different hop additions. The hop addition usually at the front of the boil is for the bittering hops, and at the end of the boil is for aroma hops. Well, because we used a can of hopped extract in this, we kind of knocked out the bittering hop part or the front part of the boil. So we only ended up doing a 45-minute boil. And now that we're at the end of the boil, we're going to add our aroma hops into the boil. One little note I want to remind you of, if I didn't say earlier, when doing the boil and when adding malt extract, you want to be real careful because, especially when you throw it in, you get an upheaval, you get a lot of foam, and you have what's called a boil over, and it's an absolute mess. This stuff is sweet and sticky, and you want to avoid that. Also, when you do a boil, don't walk away from it. Don't go out to a different part of the house. Keep your eye on this stuff because, again, you could get a boil over, especially when you're heating it back up after adding the hop or malt extract. And here's another point where you can get a little bit of a flare up too, is when you add hops. So we're going to go ahead and add our aroma hops. We're using Cascade hops. We'll give it just a little stir. Alrighty. And we're almost done with the boil. Where we'll go from here is we're going to take this off the heat and we're going to cool it. Now, one thing I like about this kit and what we're doing is we really have about 2.5 gallons of wort, even though we're making a 5-gallon batch. And what that allows us to do is if we had to cool all 5 gallons of wort, I've done those big batches before, it's really tough to cool it real quick. If you had a plate chiller or something like that, but a regular ice bath, it does take a while to cool that much wort. Well, because we only have 2.5 gallons roughly right now, A, it cools faster, and B, what we're going to do is in our 5-gallon fermenter, after we cool this down a little bit, we'll add this into the fermenter and then add cool water in there to, again, bring it down faster. And actually what I want to do, because again, we need to add more volume water to this, when I throw this in my little ice bath, I'm going to throw additional ice in here to cool it off even faster, because you really want to cool this down so you can get it in your fermenter as fast as possible, avoid any bacteria getting in there or what have you. So let me get this wort cooled down, then we'll come back at the end and I'll discuss about bottling and how long we're going to let this ferment. Alrighty, to wrap up, we took our TrewBrew homebrew kit. It was a pale ale. We were going to make 5 gallons. This is a partial mash kit, similar to some we've done before. We started off, we steeped our grains for 15 minutes. After we got done steeping the grains, we did a 2.5 gallon boil instead of a full 5. We did 2.5 gallons, steeped our grains, brought that, after steeping the grains, we brought the solution up to a boil. We then added our liquid hopped malt extract and our unhopped dried malt extract. After adding those in, we brought it back up to a boil, and we did a 45-minute boil, different than the traditional 65 or 60-minute boils that you would see a lot of other beer kits. But we did follow. but that's what's recommended in here. And that's because at the end of the boil, we added our aroma hops. Normally in a 60-minute boil, at the start of the boil, you're adding bittering hops. But because we had a liquid hop malt extract, we didn't have to go through that step. So I believe that's why they suggest a 45-minute boil. After the end of the 45-minute boil, we had roughly 2+ gallons of wort that we quickly chilled and then threw into our fermenter and added additional cool water, and I threw some ice in, and that helped cool down the wort faster than if I had brewed a full 5 gallons and had to cool that in a traditional ice bath. It would just take a long time. But because we only had a couple of gallons to cool down, it worked a lot faster. After that, I got everything in the fermenter. We added the packet of yeast that came with it. Now in these kits, they come with a kind of a generic packet of Mutton's ale yeast. If this is something you feel like tweaking, if you have access to other ale yeast, or let's say instead of a pale ale kit, they did a stout kit or a barley wine, you can adjust accordingly with the yeast. We are going to let this sit in the fermenter for 2 weeks like they recommend, and then afterwards they recommend bottling for 2 weeks and then you're ready to serve. I would suggest that after the 2 weeks in the fermenter, we're going to bottle, leave the bottles at room temperature for a couple weeks, and then I'm going to throw in the fridge and let them sit for another 2 weeks in the refrigerator or condition for 2 more additional weeks. You don't have to. If you can't wait, that's fine. I always recommend giving your bottles a couple extra weeks, just letting them kind of finish out the process. Beer's not like wine that you need necessarily mature, but just a little patience, and I think you feel like you'll get a better product. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like these videos because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. Any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Until next time, bottoms up.